Something's changed in the stories we tell, especially the ones we tell our children. Modern Disney doesn't just entertain, it teaches. And what it's teaching now is deeply confused. This episode, we take a hard look at Frozen and the moral messages quietly shaping a generation. Plus, real courage in the White House, a tax promise delivered, and a letter to bicyclists I shouldn't have to write. All that today on the Restless Signal. Welcome to the Restless Signal, where we seek truth, wrestle with meaning, and strive to live well. I'm the voice of the signal, and together we're tuning in. This episode might surprise you. Not because it's the takedown of a movie, it's not intended to be. I'm not here to nitpick animated films or pile on top of pop culture icons just to make a point. I'm here because I love stories. I love what they do to us and what they reveal about us. And something has changed, not just in Disney, but in the kinds of stories we're telling, in what we celebrate, in what we teach, and in what we quietly accept. As a father of four, I've seen a lot of Disney movies, especially the recent ones. Moana, Encanto, Coco, Inside Out. My family enjoys them, and so do I. Some of them are quite fun. And I was more than happy to share the Disney movies I grew up with. Sleeping Beauty, Peter Pan, Aladdin. Those are great. And my daughters, they love that one, Frozen. They sing the song, the one that we're all singing in our heads just now. We've watched it, I don't know, probably more times than I can count. And honestly, yeah, I understand it. The music is great, the animation is stunning, and it's funny. And I really like the sisterly bond at the center. I honestly think that's beautiful, and I really love seeing how my daughters react to it and thinking about them and their bond growing. So it's not all bad, but beneath the sparkle and the spectacle, something feels off. At first, it was just kind of like a subtle nagging to me, and the more I watched it, the more I kind of realized I didn't really agree with the themes and the underlying values that were being taught, that they were backwards and confused. Not that the older Disney catalog was perfect, by no means, but most of the time, I felt that it still aimed at true north, that it tried to shape children and even adults into better people. The new ones, the more we watched and the more I thought about it over time, I began to realize this wasn't just about fuzzy morality. It was something deeper, kind of a distortion, a corruption of ideas that I think once held real moral weight. Words like love, freedom, and truth. They are used in ways that sound beautiful, but they don't hold up. In fact, the way that Disney uses them, they often point us in the wrong direction. These stories aren't just different from the ones we grew up with. They're part of something bigger. I think they reflect the cultural confusion of our time. And at the same time, they are also helping to shape it. So they're both mirrors reflecting the moment and at the same time amplifiers. So yes, we're going to talk about Frozen in this episode. But it's not really about Frozen. It's about what Frozen represents. It's about how modern Disney and frankly modern storytelling has quietly traded moral formation for emotional validation. And how we, as parents, citizens, and lovers of truth, have to start paying attention. Because stories don't just entertain, stories shape souls. And the stories we tell our children and ourselves today help determine what kind of people we become tomorrow. So let's jump into it. Frozen wasn't the first flawed Disney movie by any means, but I think it was the moment the shift became unmistakable that this film had traded moral formation for this emotional validation, kind of coddling that we see. They replaced a hero's journey with a celebration of self-discovery. They hollowed out virtue and dressed it up. So let's walk through the story and what I think it's really teaching us. So to start off with, I'm going to assume that most of the listeners have watched the movie, so I'm gonna be pretty light on the plot points just to hit what I'm focused on here. So hopefully that it's enough for you to understand where I'm coming from. And needless to say, spoiler alert. The movie starts with our main characters, Elsa and Anna, as sisters who are princesses in the kingdom of Arendelle. As children, Elsa has this magical ice power, and she accidentally strikes her sister in the head while they were playing, results in her parents reacting that she needs to keep her powers hidden until she's old enough to control them. So her parents teach her to, quote, conceal, don't feel, don't let it show, which becomes one of the central lines of the film that the morality is kind of rejecting. Now, I would agree that this starts with a grain of truth. Complete emotional suppression can be harmful, but the film takes that truth and slides into something false. Restraint becomes the victim. Self control is cast as oppression. So, right at the beginning, Elsa's struggle isn't framed as a journey towards maturity or mastery, it's a build up to eruption. Her power is not something to steward, it's something that's been wrongfully contained. So then, fast forward a little bit, the girls grow up and eventually their parents die in a shipwreck, and Elsa is crowned queen of Arendelle. And during her coronation, she gets into an argument with her sister Anna. Anna has an ill-advised move, agreed to marry a prince that is visiting for the coronation that she just met that day. Anna has clearly also been damaged by the years of isolation that the parents imposed, and was willing to get married to someone she just met. And Elsa, to her one credit, at least in this film, is wise enough to say you can't marry someone you just met that day. But this results in a fight. Elsa ultimately ends up unleashing her powers accidentally during the argument, and she flees from her castle in terror. And as she's doing that, she accidentally unleashes an eternal winter over her kingdom. So then she flees into the mountains, and then she uses her ice powers to create an ice castle, and she sings the breakout hit of the movie, "Let It Go." This song has a lot of key themes that I think are wrong with this movie, but I think this line in particular sums it up. No right, no wrong, no rules for me, I'm free. This line is framed as self empowerment, but in the truth, it's emotional chaos disguised as liberation. Her moment of triumph is also the moment, and when you step back and think about it, that she has abandoned her people and leaves them to suffer. She doesn't offer an apology. We never see her show remorse. The film portrays her as a misunderstood victim, not someone whose unchecked emotions has brought harm, and that regardless of the emotions at the time, you still are accountable for your actions. So, kind of moving forward in the film, Anna follows her into the mountains and finally reaches Elsa in her ice palace. And again, they have an argument. And at this time, Elsa again loses control of her powers, and this time strikes Anna with her magic powers, this time in the heart. Now, this could have been a turning point in the film, that Elsa has to reckon with what she's becoming and what she's doing, whether she's doing it under duress or not. But Elsa doesn't have that realization. She doesn't apologize or confront the reality of what she's done. She simply sends Anna away. In fact, even has like a ice monster attack them. So the message is simple. If you're overwhelmed, your outbursts aren't just understandable; they're morally neutral, if not justified. Which is, I think, is just an awful message that we should be teaching our our children and young adults. And I think kind of if you think back to the last episode where people talking about how self-regulation and emotional control have been lost amongst our youth because of a lack of strong parenting and enforcing boundaries, I think that this kind of permissive moralizing about feelings is also part of the problem. Getting back to the film, later Anna is taken by a man that she meets in the mountain that helps her, Kristoff, to a group of trolls who are going to help Anna with the fact that she has been struck by this magic power. Her hair is slowly turning white, so she's cursed by the magic that she got hit from Elsa. And these trolls are like the adopted family of Kristoff from when he was young. And so when he brings Anna to meet them to get help, they rashly assume that this is his girlfriend that he's looking to marry. And this sets up a kind of a humorous song and kind of misunderstanding of what's going on. So it's a cute scene, but I think it also kind of presents problematic values here. So I think the key line here is where they sing, "People make bad choices when they're mad or scared or stressed, but throw a little love their way and you bring out their best." So yeah, it's charming on the surface, but I think the message is kind of flawed here. First, bad behavior isn't wrong. It's just a result of your circumstances. Second, people don't need to grow. You just need to love them harder. Finally, love doesn't confront, it simply absorbs. Unfortunately, that's not how love works. That's not how we grow. And basically, they're selling codependency as wisdom. Moving forward in the film, eventually Elsa is captured by the true villain of the film, Hans, who is a prince from another country. That was the man that Anna had ill-advisedly agreed to marry earlier in the film. And he brings Elsa back to the castle in a jail. At this point, it would be an opportunity for Elsa to reflect on what's happening and what her role in it is. Her kingdom is in chaos. Her sister, she is told, is dying from having been struck by her magic power. This would be a classic moment for character growth. But it doesn't happen. All she wants to do is escape. She doesn't want to help. She doesn't want to help her sister. It at least doesn't seem to show that she wants to help her sister or stop the ice storm. She just wants to get out of there. She just wants to be. She's fearful and just wants to flee. There's no inner conflict, no confrontation with herself. And as we build towards the conclusion of the film, as Anna is dying with this ice power, we are told that only an act of true love can thaw a frozen heart. This line was really this line could have been a heart of the film, and for a moment it almost is. Originally, the characters and the audience assumes that an act of true love means a true love's kiss. That's the answer, like in many fairy tales or Disney films. But in this film, to its credit, they go a different direction. Ultimately, Anna sacrifices herself to save Elsa from being struck by a sword by Hans. And that's the true act of love. And here I would agree. This was an act of love of the true classical sense of what love really is, willing the good of another at cost to oneself. But instead of sitting with that cost and making that sacrifice mean something, the film immediately reverses it. Anna freezes for just a moment, then instantly unfreezes because of her act of love. They portray love as just a magic trigger, not really a formative lesson. The sacrifice is real, but the consequences are erased. Now, I don't want to oversell this too much. I understand this was, this is a Disney movie and kids are an audience of it, but the film had the courage to show real virtue. They would have allowed Anna to stay dead, to honor that sacrifice, and to actually show that good intentions and good acts aren't a magic spell that make problems disappear, right? Just because good is done in the world doesn't mean there's going to be bad consequences that come, but that doesn't mean it's still not good to do good. And it reminds me of, the famous line Rhett Butler said to Scarlett O'Hara, "My darling, you're such a child. You think that by saying sorry, all the past can be corrected." And that just seems very, very apt here. Frozen teaches a similar lesson, except with magic. And in the final act, Elsa realizes that love is the key to controlling her powers. But how? Love of whom? What kind of love? Why now? The film never explains. And she doesn't apologize. She doesn't acknowledge harm that she's done. She just suddenly feels something and everything is resolved. The winter thaws. But Elsa doesn't. Her act ends not in growth, but in comfort. She didn't become good. She was always good according to Disney's morality. And now she's free to be herself. Frozen doesn't just fail to offer formation. It actively undermines it. It whispers to the emotionally fragile, you're already good. Your pain is your truth. You don't need to change. Just be understood. Modern Disney storytelling reflects the moral confusion of our time. This is a break from old Disney. I think old Disney got things right, at least most of the time. Of course, it had its flaws. And of course, they kind of offered a simplistic vision of morality and virtue. But they pointed children upward. They acknowledged good and evil as real things. They celebrated virtue and warned against vice. They told stories that didn't just entertain, but they formed. Today, Disney doesn't ask children to grow. It asks adults to regress. These stories aren't about moral formation anymore. They're about emotional validation. They've been designed not to cultivate wisdom, but to soothe insecurity. They reflect a worldview where every challenge is trauma, every limitation is oppression, and the ultimate goal is not to become good, but to become accepted just as you are. And it's not just Frozen. You can see the pattern across most of the Disney catalog for the past 10 years or so. Encanto, the family's dysfunction isn't anyone's fault, it's the pressure of expectations. The resolution isn't repentance or reconciliation, it's just letting go of standards. Moana, her father's caution is framed as fear. Her rebellion is celebrated simply because it's hers. Tradition isn't tested, it's discarded. Frozen 2. Elsa follows a mysterious voice, discovers she's essentially a goddess, and the story congratulates her for listening to herself. No accountability, no growth, just more self-actualization. And finally, Coco, a beautiful film in some regards, but problematic in that its central goal is to be remembered after death. Not to be good, not to be faithful, just remembered. That's deeply flawed. First of all, it's not true. Most of us won't be remembered very long. And finally, that's not a bad thing. That's not a failure, because that's not what we're here for. Again and again, the message isn't become good. It's you were good all along. And that may feel affirming, but it's not true. And it's not how life works. And it's certainly not how character is formed. Because if you tell someone over and over again that they're already enough, that they don't need to change or grow or be corrected, God forbid, you're not setting them free. You're setting them adrift. And you're setting them up for failure. You're removing the possibility of transformation. You're telling them that their feelings are true and the only real enemy is judgment. And when you bake that message into films watched by millions of children, you're no longer reflecting the culture, you're shaping it. You're shaping people to become fragile, unaccountable, self-absorbed, and confused. And this isn't just forming children poorly, it's reinforcing emotional dysfunction in adults, many of whom already struggle with self-regulation, boundaries, and the difference between feelings and truth. But Frozen and modern Disney don't just have flawed stories. They're morally bankrupt ones. And they're more dangerous because they're beautifully made. Once more, they use the language of virtue, love, freedom, sacrifice, while stripping those words of real meaning. Language shapes thoughts, and when you hollow out moral language, you don't just change how people speak, you change how they think, what they value, and how they live. Modern Disney still uses all the right words. The scripts are full of familiar moral language, but the meanings have been drained out. What remains is a shell. Words that sound noble, but now signal something totally different. These aren't just shifts in definitions, they're distortions of sacred things. Let's take a few examples. Love. Once the highest moral virtue, love meant willing the good of the other, sacrifice, truth-telling, self-restraint. Now, if love is anything more than just an emotion in today's age and in modern Disney, it means affirmation, feeling safe, feeling seen. It's no longer something you do for someone else. It's something you demand from everyone else. It's not charity, it's entitlement. Freedom. Once freedom meant the power to do what is right, to rise above impulse, to choose the good. Now, freedom means liberation from any restraint, whether it's tradition, responsibility, or even biology. It's no longer a moral condition. It's a personal boundary you draw so no one can question your desires. Authenticity. Once authenticity meant integrity, consistency between belief and action, being true to what is right, even when it's hard. Now it means impulsiveness, being true to your feelings in the moment, no matter how selfish, unstable, or destructive they may be. It's not about honesty, it's about indulgence. This isn't just a vocabulary issue, it's a moral bait and switch. These words used to point towards something transcendent, something noble. They were bridges to virtue. Now they're tools of manipulation. They sound good, so they can't be questioned. They feel familiar, so we stop asking what they actually mean. But when you redefine love to mean affirmation, and freedom to mean indulgence, and authenticity to mean emotion, you don't just change the story, you change the soul. And that's exactly what's happening. We're raising a generation that uses the words, but has no idea what they cost, what they demand, or what they're for. Once you distort the meaning of words, the consequences don't stay in the dictionary. They spill out into the world. They shape expectations, relationships, institutions. They shape souls. Because when children hear words like love and freedom and truth, but never learn what those words demand, they grow up in a world of moral noise. They may speak the language of meaning, but they're no longer fluent in what it actually means. And this matters because this isn't just about movies. It's about formation. We're shaping souls with the stories we tell. And we feed a generation these messages. The feelings are truth, that virtue is oppressive, that restraint is harmful, that love means never being challenged. You're not just telling bad stories. You're selling them poison. You're teaching them to be hollow. You're preparing them for anxiety, not adulthood. You're replacing moral clarity with emotional confusion. You turn sacred words into lies. And worst of all, you're giving them the language of meaning without the substance. You're creating a generation fluent in all the right words, but utterly unformed by what those words require. So let's say it plainly. Love isn't a mood. It's not a slogan. Love is the moral will to serve, to restrain, to sacrifice. Love is a firefighter running into a burning building to save a stranger. It's the exhausted parent awake at 2 a.m. with a colicky baby. It's the friend who tells you the truth when it'd be easier to stay quiet. It isn't soft. It isn't safe. It isn't sentimental. What it is good. Disney sells it as a sparkle, and we wonder why the world is so lost. So, this show is not just about seeking truth and wrestling meaning, but ultimately it asks the question, what should we do to live well? So what do we do with all this? If our entertainment is no longer neutral, if even the stories we enjoy on family movie night carry moral fright, how do we live in a world that forms us while we're not looking? How do we protect our kids, speak the truth, and still find beauty in a culture that's drifting? First, we stay alert. We don't consume stories passively anymore. We need to ask better questions. What is the story saying about what's good? What kind of person is it asking my child to admire? What kind of life is it telling them to want? Entertainment is never just entertainment. It is formation with a soundtrack. Second, we need to talk to our kids. We don't have to ban everything, though maybe we should think harder about that every now and then too. But at the very least, we must put these stories in context. We praise what is praiseworthy, and we challenge what is false, openly, lovingly, consistently. We don't just want kids who like good things. We need kids who know why they're good. Third, we need to educate ourselves. Let's be honest. Many of us were never taught the moral foundations of our own culture. We may have picked up a surface level understanding in high school government class, a civic vocabulary built around democracy, rights, and freedoms. But those words go far deeper than the Constitution, and they're far older. Western civilization didn't begin in 1776. It didn't begin with the Enlightenment. Thinkers like John Locke didn't invent our values. They inherited and refined them. They stood on the shoulders of a much older tradition shaped by ancient philosophy, Roman law, Jewish moral codes, and Christian theology. Now, we don't need to become scholars. I'm not asking for all of us to go out and get PhDs, but we need to brush up on the foundations. Because if we don't know what words like freedom, justice, truth, virtue actually mean, how can we defend them to our children? How can we recognize when they're being manipulated? We can't. So we have to relearn what we were never properly taught, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that follow us. Fourth, we need to reclaim the language. Words like love, freedom, sacrifice, and truth aren't just stylistic choices, they're moral anchors. We don't let the world redefine them. We live them, embody them, clarify them in our speech, in our homes, and how we treat others. That's how we fight it, not just by criticizing what's false, but by making truth visible. And finally, we need to seek better stories. Stories that just don't flatter or entertain us, but form us. That don't just reflect the world as it currently is in its broken state, but point us towards what it ought to be. Because as I've said before, in the end, we are shaped by the stories we love. So let's love better ones. So to wrap up, modern Disney didn't just evolve. It hollowed out something sacred. It took words like love, sacrifice, truth, and freedom, words with centuries of moral weight, and gutted them. Now it wears them around like grotesque costumes, hollowed out virtues parading around, pretending to be good, while leading people astray. These films don't just reflect confusion, they normalize it, package it, sell it to children and adults alike as inspiration and empowerment. But beneath the sparkle, it's not truth, it's counterfeit. It sounds beautiful, but it shapes people badly. And this isn't just about movies, it's about moral formation. It's about the kind of stories we believe, the kind of meaning we pass to our children, the kind of people we're becoming. We are told that love is a feeling, that freedom means no boundaries, that truth is whatever affirms us. And the voices pushing that message, they're loud, persistent, insidious. But those of us who still hold to something older, something deeper, know better. We know that real love isn't a feeling. It's a commitment to pursue the good of others, even when it costs us. We know that freedom wasn't given so we could indulge ourselves, but so we could choose what is right. And we know that truth isn't a vibe. It isn't personal. It isn't flexible. There aren't many versions of it. There is just one truth. Truth is real. It's fixed. It's alive. And no matter how loud the world gets, it never stops calling to us. And that's why this show exists. To help us listen, to help us remember, to help us follow the restless signal. This won't be the last time we talk about Disney. I'll return to other films in future episodes as part of a recurring series on the moral confusion in modern storytelling. But not on episode 3. That one's going to be headed in a different direction. For now, let's turn to the Bulletin. We've got some interesting stories coming in over the wire. Let's start with what I think was one of the most morally courageous things I've seen from a U.S. president in a long time. During an Oval Office meeting, not a rally, not a press stunt, but an official diplomatic engagement, President Trump met with the President of South Africa and did something no other world leader has had the guts to do. He showed him video after video of South African stadiums full of people chanting, "Kill the Boer," Boer being the word for white farmers. He showed him clips of major political figures, not fringe radicals, but actual elected officials, leading crowds and singing and shouting for the death of an entire racial group. And what did the South African president do? He refused to look at the screen. He sat there, humiliated, unwilling to even face what was right in front of him. That wasn't an ambush, despite what the media has claimed. That was a moment of moral clarity, and Trump delivered. And I'm sorry, but it's absolutely sickening that the American press, driven by its pathological hatred of Trump, could look at that scene and describe it as an ambush. Are you kidding me? This wasn't a policy disagreement. This wasn't spin. This was a leader calling out racial hatred, murderous hatred, to the face of the man presiding over it. Where's the outrage? Where are the usual defenders of human rights? These are people chanting for racial extermination in stadiums in broad daylight. Now, let me be careful here. There's no evidence of a formally coordinated genocide. South African police records and even some independent watchdogs don't classify the current violence we're seeing that way. And yes, some of the videos Trump showed reportedly contained factual errors or misidentified footage. But that doesn't mean everything's fine. In fact, several credible observers, including Genocide Watch, have warned that South Africa is showing multiple early stage warning signs. So let's ask the obvious question. Why should we wait for it to become a genocide before we speak out? Isn't it better, morally and practically, to sound the alarm now while something can still be done? That's what Trump did. He didn't wait until the world was grieving bodies. He called out evil when it was still being normalized, still being justified, still being sung in stadiums. And for that, he deserves credit, not condemnation. But here's the truth. Those chants, they're real. And the violence, also real. We've had credible eyewitness accounts from white farmers, professionals, family men, people who've worked their land for generations, reporting intimidation, brutal attacks, delayed police response, and a culture of fear. There are claims of underreporting and misclassification of rural crime statistics, which is pretty believable when you consider that this same government is trying to quietly seize land and maintain international credibility at the same time. Yes, not every crime is racially motivated, but if you're a white farmer in South Africa and your government is threatening to take your land without compensation, while politicians smile as the crowd chants for your death, what would you call that? So don't lecture me about context. Don't tell me, oh, that chant is just a historical struggle cry from apartheid days. Oh, really? So now we've decided it's okay to chant for racial extermination, as long as you provide enough backstory? That logic is evil. And if we use it to justify any other racial hatred, we'd be run out of the public square, and rightfully so. And by the way, land expropriation is real. The South African government has actively pursued legal efforts to take land from white farmers without compensation. That's just not rhetoric, that's policy. So yes, these calls to violence are happening in the same environment where land seizures are underway and white South Africans are being politically and socially scapegoated. Let me say this clearly. Wrong is wrong. Hatred is hatred, and genocidal rhetoric is genocidal rhetoric, whether it comes in German, Zulu, or English. And I don't care if people are uncomfortable hearing this. Yes, I'm white. And yes, I care about the fact that people like me are being dehumanized, dispossessed of their property, and even murdered with near total indifference from the so-called civilized world. If that makes me a bad person, fine. I'll wear that like a badge of honor. Because if being good now means looking away while a group of people is being scapegoated and set up for slaughter, then I'd rather be the one who looks it in the eye and says, no, this is evil. And for once, someone in power said it too. Trump did what no one else would. He told the truth to the face of a president in the Oval Office. That's not an ambush. That's leadership. That's moral courage, and for that, I give him credit. Let's move on to our next topic and talk about a growing sickness in our culture right here at home. Our inability to name evil plainly and to care about human life without disclaimers. Wednesday in Washington, D.C., two young people, Yaron Leshinsky and Sarah Milgram, were gunned down outside the Capitol Jewish Museum. They were both employees at the Israeli embassy. Friends say they were in love and about to be engaged. They were there attending a Jewish cultural event. The shooter reportedly shouted, "Free, free Palestine," and told officers, "I did it for Gaza." And what did many people do online? Yes, there was some condemnation, but there was also hedging, contextualizing, deflection. We heard things like, "It's tragic, but you have to understand the broader conflict," or "There's a lot of pain on both sides." Let me be blunt. You don't need both sides when two unarmed people are shot outside a museum. You need a moral compass. But that compass seems to be broken oftentimes in our country these days. And we know it's broken because this wasn't the first time we've seen this happen. Earlier this year, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was murdered in New York City, shot outside his hotel while on his way to an investor conference. The suspect? A young man who reportedly targeted him for his company's coverage decisions on healthcare. A political act. A murder. And what happened online? People swooned over the killer's mugshot. They called him handsome. Some even said he was right to lash out because the healthcare system is cruel. The victim had children. They don't have a father anymore. And they now have to watch as social media and even some mainstream coverage treats the killer like a tragic antihero. This is the thread tying these events together. We are losing moral clarity. We're so caught up in ideology and grievance that we can't even say, this is wrong, without checking how it plays with our political team. We treat murder like a metaphor. We treat victims like props. And we treat perpetrators like misunderstood saints, if they fit the right narrative. This is not justice. This is not empathy. It's moral rot. Because once we start explaining away murder, once we can't grieve without qualifiers, once we wink at evil because it punches in the direction we like, then we are not serious people anymore. We are not well. We are headed towards something even darker, where even life and death are political, and love and loss are no longer enough to move us unless they check a box. Let me say this plainly. 2 people were murdered in D.C. because they were Jewish. 1 man was murdered in New York because he was a businessman. And in both cases, the killers were met with rationalization and applause. That's a sickness. That's a problem. And if we can't name it, we're in big trouble. And now for our last story that isn't quite so dark. On May 22, 2025, the House of Representatives passed Trump's flagship tax and spend package, officially named the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Among many sweeping provisions, 2 have grabbed the most attention. No federal income tax on tips, and no federal income tax on overtime pay. These were not afterthoughts. These were centerpiece promises from Trump during the 2024 campaign, designed to resonate with working-class voters, especially those in service jobs or putting in long hours. Now they're in the bill headed to the Senate. It's being sold as a blue-collar win, a populist gesture. If you work hard, you deserve to keep more. But I have some concerns about this on multiple levels. First, this is inconsistent and unfair. Why should tipped workers be exempt from income tax when other low-wage workers, people doing physical labor, working long shifts, still pay their fair share? If you make $28,000 a year folding clothes at a department store, you pay tax. But if you make $28,000 serving drinks and collecting tips, you get to skip out? That doesn't make sense. Same with overtime. Yes, overtime is tough. It's long hours, but that's why the pay rate increases. Why should the higher income get special tax treatment? If the argument is that working more is hard and deserves reward, fine, raise wages. But this kind of selective exemption just creates more distortion in a tax code that's already too convoluted. And we need to be honest about something here. This isn't just a generous break for working people. Tipped income is already underreported by a lot. It's an open secret. The IRS has acknowledged it for years, and anyone who worked in hospitality knows the game. A huge portion of tips are never formally recorded, never taxed, never declared. The system already is lopsided, and instead of fixing it, this bill formalizes the loophole. Second, everyone should pay something. Let me be clear, I'm not arguing for heavy taxes on the working poor, but there's a basic principle here that we've lost. All able-bodied, able-minded adults should contribute something to the general operation of the country. Not because it's efficient, because it's right. It's about civic duty, shared sacrifice, buying into the system. Because when a large percentage of adults pay nothing, 0 in federal income tax, it creates a divide. A class of people who feel the weight of funding the country and a class that doesn't. And that doesn't lead to unity. It leads to resentment, to entitlement, to the fraying of the national fabric. And before you say, well, they still pay payroll taxes, let's be honest. Payroll taxes fund benefit programs, Social Security, Medicare. They don't fund our military, our courts, our law enforcement, border security, diplomacy, infrastructure, or anything else that sustains a nation. We're not asking people to carry the world on their shoulders, but if you earn income, you should pay something, even just a little, to help carry the country forward. Third, the spending is out of control. This bill is expected to add up to $4 trillion on the national debt over the next decade. That's not for some progressive think tank. That's from the independent budget analysts from the Congressional Budget Office. And let's remember, Republicans have spent the last decade warning about runaway deficits and generational theft, about the looming fiscal crisis. Well, where is that concern now? We can't say we care about the debt one year and then pass a multi-trillion-dollar tax and spend package the next. We especially can't afford to slash revenues when we haven't shown the slightest interest in reducing spending. It's fantasy economics. But despite all that, I'll say something that might be surprising. I still respect this. Even though I disagree with the policy, even though I think it's, kind of reckless and morally flawed, Trump promised this, and he delivered. He made it a central campaign pledge. He talked about it constantly, and when the opportunity came, he included it. That matters. In a political landscape where most promises are forgotten the moment the rally ends, it's rare to see a politician actually do what he said he would do, especially when the cameras are off. So yes, I think this provision is bad policy. I think it's unfair. I think it encourages irresponsibility and distorts the tax code even further. But I'll still give credit where it's due. Trump didn't hedge. He didn't shift. He didn't sell it and then walk away. He said it. He did it. In a world full of empty words, that kind of integrity still counts for something. And now it's time for a segment I like to call Letters I Shouldn't Have to Write. Because apparently common sense is no longer common, and decency has been replaced by delusion. This one goes out to a very special group of people close to my heart. Those noble warriors in neon shorts, those prophets of personal fitness with a death wish and a Bluetooth headset. That's right, bicyclists, who treat public roads like personal right-of-ways. So let's begin. Dear bicyclists, I can't believe this needs to be said, but apparently it does. So let me say it plainly. You are not a car. You are not traffic. You are a hazard wrapped in spandex. And I don't mean that lightly. You are the single most entitled group of hobbyists on the planet. You are out here acting like you're morally superior for strapping on a $200 helmet and throwing your hamstrings into a glorified chain-driven lawn chair, while the rest of us are trying to get to work without killing you. Let's talk about that. You pedal yourself into the center of a lane meant for 4,000-pound vehicles moving 45 miles an hour. You clog up morning traffic with your little carbon fiber ego stick. And when people get frustrated because, they have jobs, deadlines, children, you glare at them like they're the problem. Why? Because your hobby is now a cause? Because biking is your spiritual journey and the rest of us are just guests in your enlightenment? No. You're not Gandhi on wheels. You're a traffic jam in Lycra. Let's think about the complete absurdity of this situation for just a moment. You are clogging up the legal right-of-ways in my town. Not for essential transportation, but to exercise. Exercise! You don't see me dragging my weight bench out into the middle of a busy intersection and doing chest presses between green lights. And whenever someone seems to question the logic or sensibility of my workout venue, or suggest I use a more reasonable alternative, say, a gym, I start screaming, "Hey, share the road! I've got just as much right to this space as you!" No, you don't, because I'm not insane. And let's dispense with the legal nonsense. First of all, we all know there are a lot of dumb laws out there, so if that's the best you got, you've already lost. Yes, I know. Technically, in many states, bikes are vehicles. But so are golf carts, so are tractors, so is a Zamboni if you drive it long enough. That doesn't mean they belong in the left lane on a busy street during rush hour. A tuna and a great white shark are both technically fish. That doesn't mean they belong in the same tank. You want to ride your bike? Great! But when you decide to ride it in front of me at 13 miles an hour in a traffic lane built for actual engines, now you've made your cardiovascular fitness my moral burden. And don't even get me started on the safety argument. Because let's be honest, you don't even seem to care about your own life. You have no protection, no airbags, no visibility. You're basically a water balloon in a helmet. And you've chosen to put your squishy little self in front of moving steel, betting your life that I will always do the right thing. Why should I care more about your survival than you do? Why should I carry the legal and moral weight of not ending your life because you thought it was a good day to exercise in traffic? Let me explain something to you. The road is not your gym. It's not your mindfulness trail. It's not a stage for your slow motion one-man protest against internal combustion. It's a place where people are trying to get somewhere on time, and preferably without vehicular homicide on their conscience. You are not heroic. You are not brave. You are not saving the planet. You are in the way. And the smugness is unbearable. The way you tilt your head, the self-righteous glances, the reflective gear like you're landing an aircraft. You're a slow-moving safety hazard dripping with superiority. You think you're the moral one? But you're not. You're selfish. Because every single time you ride your bike down a busy road instead of, I don't know, anywhere else, you make one simple declaration. My hobby's more important than your time, your obligations, your job, your family, your stress, your risk. Me first, everyone else can wait. Well, I'm done waiting. This is a letter I shouldn't have to write. But here I am behind you yet again, tapping my brakes and trying not to imagine my court date. So let me be crystal clear. You want respect? Get out of the way. You want safety? Get off the road. You want cardio? Join a gym. But stop using public infrastructure designed for heavy and fast machines as your personal triathlon training ground. Because you are not a vehicle. You are an obstacle, a liability, a rolling traffic hazard wrapped in delusion. And you're grinding down the patience of an entire nation, one smug, slow-motion pedal stroke at a time. Hugs and kisses. Everyone who drives a real vehicle and still has a soul and a brain. And finally, as we close in on the end of our show, let's finish up with our reason for hope. In a week full of political noise, shocking evil acts, and despicable bicyclists taking up the roadway, sometimes the most encouraging story doesn't come from Capitol Hill or Wall Street. Sometimes it comes from a missing tortoise. Last July, Leonardo disappeared from the backyard of his owner's home in a small town in Cumbria, England. He wasn't a wild animal. In fact, he had spent 13 years living under a heat lamp, pampered and cared for like a little shelled aristocrat. But one summer day, shortly after his owner had welcomed their second child, Leonardo wandered off from their backyard, gone. They launched a social media campaign. They searched, but days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. The weather turned cold. His owner admitted they didn't think he had survived. 9 months passed, and then, just 2 weeks ago, a dog walker spotted something unexpected on the side of the road. Leonardo, 1 mile from home, still alive, a little sore, but otherwise completely fine. He was taken to the local pet shop, where the staff helped identify him and reunite him with his very relieved and slightly baffled owner. Now, look, I get it, it's a tortoise. It didn't cure cancer, it didn't fix the economy, but this story feels like something more. Because Leonardo didn't sprint, he didn't strategize, he didn't know where he was going. He just kept crawling forward, slowly, quietly, invisibly, through fall, through winter, through whatever obstacles lay in his path. And somehow, he made it back. That's not just cute. That's hope. Because some of us feel lost. Some of us feel behind. Some of us wonder if we've wandered too far or missed our shot. But Leonardo made it. 1 slow, determined mile. 9 months of not giving up. And maybe that's the reminder we need. That slow progress is still progress. That winter doesn't last for forever. That you don't have to be fast, you just have to keep moving. And that even when we wander off track, home is still possible. And that is our reason for hope. Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for tuning in. We'll try to be transmitting again soon. Until next time, seek truth, wrestle with meaning, live well. And above all, keep your signal clear. You've been listening to the Restless Signal podcast, copyright 2025, all rights reserved. Check us out on the web at therestlesssignal.com.